We offer you deep historical information from history on YouTube channel. Subscribe. Now don't forget to turn on notifications. Ukraine's non-destruction, a nation's resistance. On 24 February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale military attack on Ukraine. This offensive is considered to be the biggest military conflict in Europe since the Second World War. Ukraine showed unexpected resistance despite the fact that the Russian army was much larger and stronger. The courage and heroism of the Ukrainians surprised the world. Reasons for the Ukrainian resistance. There are many reasons for the resistance of the Ukrainians. The most important ones are independence. Ukrainians are fighting for their independence. Ukraine gained independence from the Soviet Union in 1991 and has been fighting for its right to self-determination ever since. Freedom. Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom. Ukraine wants to be a democratic country and does not want to live in the shadow of Russia's dictatorial regime. Sovereignty. Ukrainians are fighting for their sovereignty. Ukraine wants to remain in control of its territory and resist Russian occupation. Identity. Ukrainians are fighting for their identity. Ukraine is a country with a distinctive culture and history, and Ukrainians want to preserve this identity against Russia's policy of assimilation. Consequences of Ukraine's resistance. Ukraine's resistance has had many consequences. The most important of these are Russia's plans have been disrupted. Russia was planning a quick takeover of Ukraine, but the Ukrainian resistance thwarted these plans. The Russian army has been weakened. The war in Ukraine has shown that the Russian army is weak. The Russian army has suffered heavy losses in the face of Ukrainian resistance. International support for Ukraine has increased. Ukraine's resistance has increased support for Ukraine in the international community. Many countries provided Ukraine with weapons and financial aid. Ukraine's national unity strengthened. Ukraine's resistance strengthened the national unity of Ukrainians. Ukrainians came together to fight a common enemy. Ukraine's future. Ukraine's future is uncertain. The war is still going on and it is unclear when and how Ukraine will end. But the resistance of Ukrainians shows Ukraine's determination to remain an independent and free country. The importance of Ukraine's resistance. Ukraine's resistance is important not only for Ukraine but for the whole world. The courage and heroism of Ukrainians has become a symbol of the struggle for freedom and democracy. Ukraine's resistance can inspire people all over the world to resist dictatorship and occupation. Fronts of resistance. From armed forces to civil defense, Ukraine's resistance does not take place on a single front, but on many fronts. These are armed forces. The Ukrainian armed forces are fiercely resisting Russian aggression. Ukrainian soldiers are challenging the Russian army with their high motivation and defensive strategies. Territorial defense units. In addition to the Ukrainian army, territorial defense units, made up of civilians, play an important role. These troops will help defend cities and towns and prevent the movement of Russian troops. Cyber defense. Ukraine is also resisting Russia in the field of cyber warfare. Ukrainian cybersecurity experts are trying to disrupt Russia's military operations by attacking its computer systems. Diplomacy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and diplomatic officials are working hard to build support for Ukraine in the international community. Zelensky has made historic speeches to raise the world's awareness of Ukraine's situation. Media and information war. Ukrainian media and ordinary citizens are playing an important role in bringing the reality of the war to the world. Social media platforms are being used to document Ukraine's resistance and Russia's atrocities. Faces of war, stories of heroism. The Ukrainian resistance is filled with countless stories of heroism. Examples include the following. Snake Island, Defense 13. Ukrainian border guards on Snake Island near Sevastopol became a symbol when they refused a Russian warship's call to surrender. Ghost of Kiev. The legend of a Ukrainian Air Force pilot who shot down Russian planes gave morale to the Ukrainian people. Examples of civil defense. Ordinary citizens supporting the defense by making Molotov cocktails, volunteering in hospitals and helping refugees are examples of the solidarity of Ukrainian society. The cost of war. destruction and loss. Unfortunately, Ukraine's resistance has come at a price. The war has devastated Ukraine. Cities and towns have been bombed, infrastructure damaged, and millions of people displaced. Thousands of soldiers and civilians have died in the war. Humanitarian crisis and refugee problem. The war has created a humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Millions of people have been forced to flee their homes. Europe has seen the largest influx of refugees since the Second World War. An international relief effort has been launched to provide food, shelter, healthcare, and psychological support to the refugees. Cultural impact of the war. The war also had a devastating effect on Ukraine's cultural heritage. Historic buildings have been bombed, museums looted, and works of art destroyed. International efforts are being made to preserve Ukraine's cultural identity. The future of Ukrainian resistance. It is uncertain how long Ukraine's resistance will continue. However, the courage and determination of the Ukrainian people is having a significant impact on the course of the war. Ukraine's future will depend on the outcome of the war and the support of the international community. World response, sanctions, and support. Ukraine's resistance has received a huge response from the international community. Many countries have shown their support for Ukraine by imposing sanctions on Russia. These sanctions target Russia's economy and aim to reduce its ability to finance its military operations. Economic sanctions. The sanctions imposed on Russia cover the banking system, the energy sector, and technology trade. These sanctions are expected to deal a severe blow to the Russian economy. Arms and equipment assistance. The US and other Western countries are providing Ukraine with arms and military equipment. This aid is intended to strengthen the defensive capabilities of the Ukrainian armed forces. Humanitarian aid. International agencies and NGOs are working to respond to the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Major efforts are being made to provide food, shelter, healthcare, and psychological support. Diplomatic efforts. Diplomatic efforts to end the war continue. However, negotiations between Russia and Ukraine have so far been unsuccessful. Global impact of the war. The war in Ukraine also has global implications. Some of these are energy crisis. Russia is a major supplier of energy to Europe. The war could lead to an increase in energy prices and a global energy crisis. Food security. Ukraine and Russia are among the world's largest exporters of wheat. The war could lead to a rise in food prices and create a food security problem. World economy. The war could have a negative impact on the global economy by disrupting global supply chains. Geopolitical balance. The war in Ukraine could change the global balance of power and lead to a new Cold War era. Looking to the future. Post-war Ukraine. Ukraine's future is uncertain, but once the war is over, the country will embark on a major reconstruction process. It will face the daunting tasks of rebuilding infrastructure, reviving the economy, and repatriating refugees. Ukraine will need the support of the international community to heal the wounds of war. The legacy of Ukraine's resistance. Ukraine's resistance will take its place as one of the unforgettable events in human history. Ukrainians have inspired the whole world by bravely fighting for their independence and freedom. The Ukrainian resistance proved the strength of a nation's unity and determination. Conclusion. Ukraine's resistance is one of the most inspiring stories in human history. Ukrainians have taught the whole world a lesson by bravely fighting for their independence and freedom. Although the outcome of this resistance is not yet clear, the courage and determination of the Ukrainian people will take their place in the pages of history. We offer you deep historical information from history on YouTube channel. Subscribe. Now don't forget to turn on notifications.